Good evening to our viewers, here at home and around the world. I am your host, Ajuri in Ngelale, and you are most welcome to this special edition report card series of the State of the Nation. Unique in the fact that it is a major contributor to every tier of the electric power sector value chain, being power generation, transmission, and distribution, the talk of the power sector over the past few years has primarily been about the National Integrated Power Project, NIPP. Intended to produce 5,000 megawatts of new electricity for the national grid, its contribution to the other critical components of the electric power market are less known and more complex in nature. As a more integrated and endowed big brother to the original Independent Power Producers IPP scheme that was implemented under President Olusegun Obasanjo, the NIPP arrangement has suffered its fair share of setbacks. How did the scheme come about? How will the National Integrated Power Project impact all aspects of power sector revival? What are the challenges facing its completion and full handover to the private sector? Will its inauguration ensure the end of power outages across the country? These are the questions and issues being addressed on this edition of the State of the Nation. Conceived in 2004 under President Olusegun Obasanjo, the National Integrated Power Project, NIPP, was set back severally by inconsistent policy and a lack of political will early on in its development stages. How did we get to the point where the entire scheme is preparing for privatization? Are any potential obstacles still standing in the way of the project's completion? This is one of our concerns as we evaluate the state of the NIPP this evening. Integrated is defined as making into a whole by bringing all parts together. But in the case of the NIPP, what is being brought together? Is it the 10 gas-fired power plants being constructed, inaugurated, and sold under the arrangement? Or is it the integration of every component of the electric power sector market through the scheme? Integration in the context of the scheme is in the form of the latter. But how? Just how will the National Integrated Power Project integrate each link of the electric power sector value chain? This is at the center of our evaluation on this edition of the program. As has been well documented over time, the National Integrated Power Project is comprised of 10 gas-fired power stations, almost all located in Nigeria's Niger Delta region. Each power plant generates varying amounts of electric power and are all handled by different contractors. These differences ensure that their target completion dates are dissimilar. What is the actual state of the power plants being constructed under the scheme, and how might they factor into the federal government's larger power sector reform agenda? These questions and issues will be frontally addressed this evening. A vast swath of commercial activity and frenetic movement marked our journey to Imo State's economic and political epicenter of Owerri. In assessing the state of power supply in the land of hope, we encountered a citizenry that was in a hurry to see the nearby Igbema power plant of the NIPP scheme add its 338 megawatts of electric power to the local and national power grid. All of this and more will be under our spotlight on this edition of the State of the Nation. We deliver the report card when we come back after this short break. Stay with us. Electricity, power, well recognized to be the key driver of industry and economic expansion the world over, its supply has been far less than adequate in Africa's most populous nation, a fact well known to millions of Nigerians. At present, reforms are being implemented, but are they achieving results?
The sound of a power generator has long been the soundtrack of Nigerian life, filling both homes and businesses alike while draining the resources of its users. What is being done to boost power outputs in the country? What is standing in the way of the provision of steady power supply to Nigerians? We separate fact from fiction in the nation's power sector.
We hear from industrial leaders, government officials,
Nigerians must have electricity.
and most essentially, we hear from you, the citizen, to ascertain the actual state of the Nigerian power sector as the state of the nation presents the report card.
Given the federal government's power generation target of 40,000 megawatts by the year 2020, it is quite clear that the nation's current power generation facilities are unfit to yield that quantum of power. However, in the short term, and more particularly over the next 1 year, the National Integrated Power Project is promising to keep your lights on.
An additional 5,000 megawatts of electricity will enter the nation's power grid by July 2014, when 10 new gas-fired power plants that were predominantly built in the gas-producing states of the Federation under the National Integrated Power Project (NIPP) scheme are to be handed over to their new private sector owners. An additional 5,000 megawatts of electricity will enter the nation's power grid by July 2014, when 10 new gas-fired power plants that were predominantly built in the gas-producing states of the Federation under the National Integrated Power Project (NIPP) scheme are to be handed over to their new private sector owners. The scheme was conceived in 2004 under President Olusegun Obasanjo's administration as a government-funded initiative to stabilize Nigeria's electricity supply. The 10 power plants under the NIPP arrangement are owned by the government-run Niger Delta Power Holdings Company, NDPHC. The NDPHC will sell 80% of each plant to the winning bidder firms, while retaining 20% to bolster investor confidence in the financial and operational health of the power assets. Once completed next year, uninterrupted power supply is expected to return to Africa's most populous nation, with over 10,000 megawatts of power generated by next June. The Minister of Finance, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, recently projected that the federal government will garner about $3.2 billion, or 512 billion naira, from the sale of the 10 power plants constructed under the National Integrated Power Project after all valuations are done and finalized. Nearly all proceeds from the sale of 80% of the government's stake in the project will be used for the construction of new power transmission infrastructure across the country.
As the tangible impact of the National Integrated Project slowly avails itself to the Nigerian public, a question arises about whether it is a long-term answer to all aspects of the electric power sector value chain, or merely a short-term fix for a sector long confronted with the introduction of new plans and schemes only to fall apart in key implementation phases.
The National Integrated Power Project (NIPP) was founded to address 4 key concerns in the electric power sector, encompassing all aspects of the electric market, namely aging power generation assets with poor maintenance records, increasing breakdown frequencies, as well as decreasing service reliability. Secondly, it was intended to address years of underinvestment in transmission infrastructure, leading to acute deficiencies in the wheeling capacity of the national grid, as well as frequent improvisations which compromise grid integrity and occasional cases of stranded generation. It was also intended to utilize the nation's abundance of gas as a fuel for power generation. And finally, it was also intended to address system and process inefficiencies associated with the operating structure in the industry, with several points of leakages and losses leading to a loss of system sustainability, particularly as it relates to the distribution component of the power sector value chain. Its contribution to power generation in the country doubles as its most well-known feature. The more than 5,000 megawatts to be realized from the scheme will come from the following sources: Calabar Power Plant, 561 megawatts. Ihovbo Power Plant, 450 megawatts. Sapele Power Plant, 450 megawatts. Alauji Power Plant, 1,074 megawatts. Ibom Power Plant, 190 megawatts. Bahrain Power Plant, 225 megawatts. Omoku Power Plant, 250 megawatts. Olorunshogo 2 Power Plant, 750 megawatts. Omotosho 2 Power Plant, 500 megawatts. Igbema Power Plant, 338 megawatts. Geregu 2 Power Plant, 434 megawatts.
Today, we are adding the Omotosho Phase 2 power plant, which has a design capacity of 513 megawatts, built to accommodate future conversion to combined cycle gas turbine configuration. This open cycle gas turbine power plant will greatly enhance our ability to boost power supply. It will further drive government's effort towards increased productive capacity across our national economy. Our target is to boost national generation capacity by 4,700 megawatts through our 10 NRPP projects across the country.
The successful signing of agreements between the federal government and new owners of the privatized generation and distribution companies are all pointers to the commitment of your administration to the growth of the power sector. It is evident that all these concrete steps will herald a new horizon in the power sector and will drive darkness far away permanently from Nigeria.
The contract for the construction of this second phase development of the power plant at Omotosho, which we fondly call Omotosho 2, was initially executed with the contractors Mrs. China Machinery and Engineering Corporation, CIME, in April 2007 as a combined cycle power plant with 4 GE Frame 9 gas turbines, with additional 2 steam turbines powered by the gas turbine exhaust heat recovery boilers. However, work could not commence on the project because NRPP funding was suspended immediately the contract was awarded, for the reasons I've earlier stated. The project was rescoped to only 4 gas turbines operating in simple cycle mode, following the wise counsel you represented, Mr. President, and partly captured above. Construction was commenced on site in April 2010 and progressed rapidly according to schedule. The first gas turbine unit plus the common systems went into full commercial operation upon the conclusion of final completion tests on 14 July 2012, while the other 3 units were completed and put to commercial use in quick succession on 24th September, 30th October, and 15th December 2012, respectively. The power station, as rescoped, consists of 4 General Electric GE Frame 9E gas turbines with a design combined site output rating of 500 megawatts. There is a switch here currently evacuating the outputs of the gas turbine generators to the national grid on 330 kV voltage level, connecting lines from Benin City and Ikeja West substations by means of a link to one of the 2 circuits of Benin Ikeja West transmission line. To further enhance the wheeling capacity of the power transmission network and full evacuation of the generated outputs of the 2 power plants now in Omotosho, Phase 1 and the Phase 2, the Transmission Company of Nigeria has commenced work on a new transmission substation located close by at Omotosho village, an additional 330 kV transmission line circuits to Epe, Aja, and Okearo in Lagos. The project also includes the modification of the existing NGC's gas station to provide independent metering and facilitate steady gas supply to the new power plant.
Today is far different from yesterday. The road to the privatization of the National Integrated Power Project has been marked by considerable controversy and near failure. As aforementioned, the National Integrated Power Project was initiated in 2004 under the administration of Olusegun Obasanjo. It was initiated under the coordination of the then Minister of Power, Ngelale Moke, whom serves as the current governor of Cross River State. The project had faced very uncertain times early in its developmental stages over ambiguous and convoluted funding arrangements, which had ultimately led to its abandonment between 2007 and 2009 under the administration of late President Umaru Musa Yar'Adua, a very tenuous period that had nearly resulted in its demise. The problems with the scheme early on began following the dispute between the federal government and the Revenue Mobilization Allocation and Fiscal Commission, RMAFC, over deductions from the excess crude account, ECA, to fund the NIPP projects, resulting in the federal government being dragged to court by the Commission. As the judicial process lingered on, the project was rendered dormant over an extensive period of time, while imported equipment for the NIPP project's construction remained abandoned at the nation's ports. Worse still was the fact that much progress had been made at the time of the stall, which meant that fully executed aspects of the projects began to wear and tear due to the long period of abandonment. However, the controversy and volatility of the early implementation phase of the project had informed its evolution into a sort of interventionist program for which the funding would now draw from every one of the three tiers of government, with a view to addressing the huge infrastructural gap in the nation's power sector and repositioning Nigeria's electricity supply industry, NESI, properly for the successful transition from the state-run monopoly status to being a private sector-driven competitive industry. Apart from the challenge posed by the lawsuit filed against the federal government by the RMFAC, the project was also faced with other hiccups, such as the lack of adequate and passable access roadways for the transportation of extremely heavy and sizable equipments and power plant parts, such as turbines that could not be delivered to the respective sites of the NIPP power plants, even after a resolution was reached establishing the new funding arrangement to be shared by the three tiers of government under the Niger Delta Power Holdings Company, NDPHC. Another significant challenge facing the 10 gas-fired power plants comprising the NIPP scheme has been the volatility of gas supply to the plants. The degradation of the nation's Niger Delta region brought about peculiar new threats such as militancy, illegal crude oil trading, and pipeline vandalism with its associated forms of theft. While gas availability to the NIPP's thermal power stations is now being addressed by the new Oil and Gas Master Plan of the Ministry of Petroleum Resources, it remains a challenge in the short to medium term. Another obstacle to the project was the extremely high cost of compensation for lands where the plants were being constructed, though these issues have been resolved over time.
Aside from the 5,000 megawatts of new electricity generated by the scheme and the fact that the proceeds from the sale of the scheme will go straight to power transmission projects, directly within the ambits of the scheme itself, power transmission projects as well as power distribution projects are being undertaken.
To evacuate power to be generated from the NIPP stations, about 1,737 circuit kilometers of 330 kV lines and 940 kilometers of 132 kV lines have so far been constructed as part of the transmission projects under the NIPP scheme. These power transmission projects, which are split into 105 separate projects, include 40 transmission lines, 45 transmission substations, 20 substation extensions, and telecommunication protection infrastructures to cover all NIPP power plants and transmission lots. Also, there are ongoing and completed NIPP power distribution projects in all of the 11 distribution companies unbundled from the Power Holdings Company of Nigeria, PHCN. Some of the power distribution projects include 1,701 kilometers of 33 kV lines, 2,666 kilometers of 11 kV lines, and 3,540 MVA additional injection capacity. More projects completed and inaugurated in 4 other states are to include 15 MVA 33 by 11 distribution injection substation in Uluku, Edo State, and 7.5 MVA 33 by 11 distribution substation, each in Isale Uku and Ila in Delta States, respectively. Also inaugurated in the NIPP scheme were the 1 by 7.5 MVA injection substation, each in Orofite and Amici in Anambra State, a 2 by 2.5 MVA EK distribution injection substation, and 7.5 MVA, including completely self-protected transformers, have been provided under the NIPP scheme. Restlessness in the land of hope? Perhaps, particularly in a region that has seen the worst of power infrastructure neglect and decay. In Owerri, under the blare of car horns and under the shouting from pricing battles in local markets, citizens quietly made their views known to the state of the nation on the issue of power supply locally. Without further ado, they sound off.
Here in Owerri, which doubles as the capital city of Imo State, the Igbima Power Station under the NIPP scheme is set to add 338 megawatts to the national grid. But in conversations with the residents of this bustling city, it has become clear that the added power supply simply cannot come soon enough.
Every day, it's not much. Sometimes in a week, we only get 2 or 3 times in a week. It's not frequent as it used to be. Everybody need light because those are the necessity of life.
It's nothing to write home about. We don't normally have light. Since I was born, I've not experienced light for 5 hours. It's something that do come in the next 30 minutes, they will take it off. It's irregular, in fact. We've not even celebrated a day there is no power outage. What we usually see is if light comes now, the next 45 minutes, it goes off. As I'm speaking with you now, we don't have light here, and it's affecting so many businesses. Yeah, you know, some people, that the nature of the job they do require electricity so as to function, and not many of them could afford generator, all those big listers. What they have is just small. I passed my neighbor, you know, those small ones, and which cannot even power big gen or power what they are doing. Those are that into building, wedding, doesn't contribute. You see some of them going home because of power outage. So it's really telling on them. Some of them now resorted into doing one business or the other in order to get money. So it's nothing to write home about here. It's a welcome development. Anything that the federal government knows that they will do to ensure steady power supply, it's a welcome development. At least if it comes, it will reduce so many people being jobless. At least some of them, their nature of job falls into electricity, something. They can use it to be getting something every day. Because if you find out the money that they use in buying fuel, it's still telling on them. They don't make profits. Because whatever money that they get usually go through that way. So if there will be steady power supply, I believe they use it to make ends meet.
Located near Owerri, the capital city of Imo State, the Igbima Power Plant is an open-cycle gas turbine power plant built to accommodate 3 additional gas turbine generators and future conversion to combined cycle gas turbine configuration. When completed, it will add 338 megawatts of new power once inaugurated in the first quarter of next year. Next week on the State of the Nation, we assess the state of electric power sector regulation. Over the course of this series, we have presented an in-depth analysis of the privatization process, the state of power generation, as well as power transmission, but we have yet to evaluate power distribution. Of utmost concern to the end user or customer is the easy accessibility of prepaid meters and fairness in the implementation of the nation's new multi-year tariff order pricing regime, MITO. Is the nation's power regulator doing its part to protect the Nigerian electricity consumer? Are they positioned to be an effective arbiter between ordinary Nigerians and the big private sector operators of the nation's privatized power sector? This is what we assess on the next edition of the Report Card series of the State of the Nation. Thank you once again for joining us on AIT, your network of choice. My name is Ajuri Ngelale. Until next time and always, may God be with you.